Welcome to Not Your Ordinary Parts, a podcast where we talk about hard things associated with the human experience with the goal of increasing awareness, growth, and healing. You may hear information from professionally licensed therapists, life coaches, healers, doctors, etc. This information is not medical advice or therapy and is not meant to replace actual therapy or instructions given by a doctor or a personal therapist. I'm your host, Jalon Johnson. My guest today is Brenna Tighe. Brenna is a New York-based licensed mental health counselor and certified rehabilitation counselor. Brenna currently works in a private practice setting, facilitating meaningful conversations through talk therapy. Brenna uses ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and relational therapy most often with her clients to help facilitate change. Outside of the therapy room, Brenna enjoys going for daily hot girl walks, hanging out at the beach, and laughing with her husband and friends. Brenna is also the host of a podcast titled Real Effing Talk, where she has open and honest conversations with individuals about their mental health struggles, and she asks the hard-hitting questions no one wants to ask, but everyone wants to know. So, Brenna, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love what you're doing with the podcast.
Thank you so much. Also, I gave a brief introduction, but so that the audience can get to know you better, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got to who and where you are today?
Yes. So I actually went to SUNY Oswego. It's a New York State school for undergrad. Really wasn't sure what I wanted to do in the future. I've always been really good with people and kids. So my first instinct was like, oh, I'll be a teacher. So I graduated from SUNY Oswego with just a general psychology degree because I wasn't really in any one lane. And then I did go into teaching and I taught for 48 hours and I was like, this is absolutely not for me. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. So then I was just kind of working odd jobs. I was nannying, I was working at local restaurants, and there was this one girl that I was serving with, and she was telling me about this program that she just graduated from at a private school by me called Hofstra. And she was just describing what the curriculum was and what the program was. And I was like, wait, I love this. Like, I could totally do that. But what's funny is that I was more so drawn to the rehab counseling part of it. And I really was not interested in mental health counseling at all. The program advisor, like to this day, still reminds me that one of the first things I said to her was like, I never want to be that person sitting in a room that says like, how are you feeling today? Like, what's on your mind? And it's funny because that's exactly what I do now. But yeah, it kind of found me. I was in an intro to counseling class for rehabilitation counseling. And it was just a general counseling class. And the professor came up to me like midway through the semester and he was like, you really should be in the mental health counseling program. And I was like, no, it's not really my vibe. Don't really want to do that. And he was like, no, like you were made to be a therapist. Like you have to do this. And his words just kind of stuck with me. And I sat on them for a couple weeks and I talked about it with my boyfriend at the time. And you know, I was just like, maybe I should do this. It's only an extra semester. Like, worst case, I never use it, but I have it. And I look back all the time and I'm like, thank God I did that because I don't know where I would be if I didn't. But yeah, so it kind of found me. And then I interned at the practice that I currently work at now. Love it. Cannot say enough great things about my boss, about my coworkers. I just really love the work that I do.
Thanks. And thank you for sharing that. And like I had mentioned, thank you for reaching out to me about wanting to do an episode with me. That was a huge moment for me because I'm normally the one who, initiates the contact to do a podcast or an episode. So when you reached out to me, that made me feel like, somebody was really seeing value in what I was doing. So I really appreciate that.
Of course. Yeah. Like I said before, I love what you're doing here. I think this is so great and, always willing to help and get my voice out there and share my story.
Okay. So since you said that, personal question, what was mental health or what did mental health look like for you growing up as a kid in and around your family?
So I don't actually think I knew what mental health was until I struggled with it myself. It wasn't something that was explained to me or talked about. Um, and that's not to say that my family was like rug sweepers. We really don't sweep things under the rug. We face things head on, but it was just one of those things that I guess like never came up. And then in college, I found myself struggling with anxiety. I didn't know what was anxiety at the time. Um, and then finally, I had a neurologist say, like, I was under the impression I had a brain tumor. And he was like, I think this is just anxiety. So once I got familiar with anxiety and what that was, I was able to kind of backtrack and look back in my life at times that I had felt anxious. So I think I'd always struggled with anxiety and just like worry, but it didn't get bad until college. And that's when I got on medication for anxiety, finally felt like calm for the first time in my life. Um, but yeah, growing up, again, it wasn't really something that was talked about. My mom has depression, and I always knew that she was on medication, but didn't know that it was for mental health, didn't know what depression was. So yeah, it was something that was there, but not discussed.
I gotcha. I think that's a lot of people's stories that, there was no such thing as really putting a name to mental health. We just were anxious, doing our best, and trying to figure it out. And along the way, we may have had some bumps or some hiccups, and we just kind of thought that was normal. That was life.
Yeah, totally.
So you're a therapist who openly talks about being in therapy. So I wanted to ask, what has your personal journey with therapy been like?
Yeah, so like I said, I didn't really know what mental health was up until college. So college was my first time in therapy, and it was recommended by my neurologist at the time, who was like, before we go on medication, you should really try therapy. And it was okay. My first therapist was not long lasting. I just didn't really vibe with him. But then my second therapist, I really loved, had great experiences with her. And I have now been working with the same therapist for about 5 years on and off. And it's been really good. As a therapist in therapy, I think that it is invaluable to have time and space each week or every other week, once a month, however often you do it, to just kind of vent about what's going on, talk through things that you're experiencing. I can't rave enough about it. Are you in therapy?
Of course.
Awesome.
That's
What's your
how,
experience with it?
well, that's how I came up with the podcast, because I started therapy and I was like, this is so good. Like, how is this something that exists? And like, we didn't know about it. This is like such a huge part of just being healthy overall. And I didn't really know what emotional health was. And when I started
Mm,
therapy, it was such a gift, and I couldn't stop talking about it. And I think people were just sick of me talking about trauma and, childhood and experiences. But then some people would pull me aside, like privately, and be like, hey, so what was that you were talking about? So I knew that people resonated with it. It may have been just something that they didn't want to talk about in public. Um, and then I do write a lot. So I would always post things that I wrote. They were like super personal and vulnerable. And then I would have, therapists like them or comment on them. And, it was therapists that I followed, and I would share some things that I wrote. And then I just was like, maybe I should just try and start a podcast and do it from like my perspective of just like, the average everyday guy talking to therapists. And that can give a window into what therapy is like, and, people have some healing. So.
I love that. Good for you.
um, so because you started therapy and it was something that was good for you, prioritizing your mental health, I think, was something that was important. Um,
hmm
have you had any difficulties maintaining relationships with family members who may not put that same priority on their mental health?
Um, I guess, yeah, I definitely have noticed that as I, of course, am in therapy myself, but especially now that I went to school to become a therapist and I am super knowledgeable in communication and stuff like that, I've noticed unwillingness from family members or friends. Like, if I'm trying to confront an issue or share how I'm feeling or share how something in the past made me feel, there are certain people that are unwilling to go there, and it'll be like, stop, we're not talking about this. So that's definitely something that I've noticed of like, ooh, okay, like that's a hard, really rigid boundary that this person has, and I wonder what's keeping them from going there. But no, I wouldn't say that it got in the way of a relationship or it like ruined any relationships for me. It's more so just an awareness that I have of like, okay, noted. Like this person is not at a point in their healing journey that they're ready to discuss this or acknowledge this. So it's more so just an awareness and an understanding on my end.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about guilt, because I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with. It feels like when we've been conditioned by society to feel guilt or shame for almost everything. How do you help your clients cope when they choose to do what's best for them, but feel guilty about doing it?
Mm. So not just specifically with guilt and shame, but with whatever my client's struggling with, I prefer to educate them on what they're going through rather than just identifying ways to fix it. I think that just giving solutions is really like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. And I find that more healing can be done when we understand what's happening. So taking guilt specifically, I think I would say, like, let's define guilt. Like, how do you define guilt? So, how I define guilt is like an unpleasant emotion that we experience when we've done something that interferes with our morals or our standards. And, it's important to acknowledge that guilt is normal and common and can be beneficial at times. Like, for example, if we steal from a store and we have guilt about it, it often prompts us to go back and rectify the situation and act in accordance to our morals. But guilt can also become maladaptive. It can be quote unquote negative. Like, for example, people with depression often have excessive guilt. Excessive guilt can make bereavement or grief more complex and challenging. And there's a difference between guilt and shame, although they're often linked together. Guilt is a private feeling. We feel guilt about a plethora of things, while shame comes more from faults in like the public eye or a community view. So I guess the long answer to that question was that, but the short answer would be like, I want to identify it and then we can talk about it going forward.
Gotcha. Something that I on my journey through therapy that I got a better understanding of was emotional immaturity. And it made so much sense once I was able to grasp the concept of it. So I wanted to ask, what does it mean to be emotionally immature? And can having a relationship with emotionally immature friends or family members take a toll on someone?
Mm, it can absolutely take a toll on someone. Again, I love playing almost like this game in therapy of like, how do you define X, Y, and Z? How I would define emotional immaturity in like the bare bones way is probably like a person's inability to cope or express their own emotions. Um, and yeah, I think it can be difficult to be in relationship with someone that is emotionally immature. And, I use the term relationship really broadly. I think that I'm talking about romantic relationships, platonic relationships, familial relationships. Oftentimes, when someone is emotionally immature, they are impulsive, needy, defensive, selfish. They have trouble taking accountability. So, yeah, it can be really difficult to be in any sort of relationship with someone that is emotionally immature.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. And the different manners in which you show that someone can be emotionally mature, because I think that can help someone maybe, give them a picture of what it looks like to be emotionally mature for themselves, or if they are in relationship with someone else. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You're big on breaking down the walls of everyone's perfect life, and I love that. So I wanted to ask, what does it look like? What does that look like? And do you get any pushback ever for being honest and open about all the things?
So I'm not out here like exposing other people and being like, you're really this way behind closed doors. I more so do that. I did that with my podcast where people like volunteered to come on and talk about their stuff. But for me, I think I like to walk my talk. So, my friends and family know I'm never the one out here to be like, oh, like this fight that I've been in with my husband for a week has been perfect and we made up and everything was great. I think it's important to talk about stuff when it gets hard. It's important to say, I'm actually not doing well this week. I'm actually really sad this week. My grief really hit me hard today. And what I found is that when I'm more vulnerable with other people, they become more vulnerable with me. And I think that also has a ripple effect, or at least I know I've had the experience of someone being vulnerable with me. So then I'm vulnerable with them, but I also feel safer to be vulnerable with other people. I'm more willing to kind of dip my toe in that water. So I think my way of breaking down the walls of everyone's perfect life is breaking down the walls of my own first.
I do agree that vulnerability can be contagious. And I think that was one of the main things that has opened so many doors for me, even this podcast, because I think I'm on my 70th episode now, which to me is nuts.
That's awesome.
But it was just because I was willing to be vulnerable and speak my truth and tell my story. And now by doing that, I've given, so many people also an opportunity to have a voice and to feel their feelings, etc. And that means so much to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should be really proud of yourself. That's amazing.
So why does it seem so difficult to feel our feelings and have these open and honest conversations?
I think that it can be difficult for an adult to feel their feelings if they weren't taught how. I've had so many clients and just friends in general who have trouble identifying an emotion. They know that they don't feel quote unquote normal, but they don't know what they're feeling. So I think that it can be difficult to feel our feelings when we can't even define them, when we don't know what they are. And having open and honest conversations, I think for some people that might be easier than others. And I think it's largely community based. What is the environment in which you were raised in? Were open and honest conversations welcome, or were they not? Because if they were, that's someone that might grow up to feel really comfortable being open and honest and vulnerable with other people. But if, open and honest conversations were not welcome as a child and in your childhood home, it might feel really hard to do that in public and as an adult. I also feel that, maybe this is more like something that women will relate to, but I know that when I was in college specifically, there was almost like an emphasis on not crying. Like you were cool if you didn't cry, like you were cool if you were unaffected by things. And at the time, I definitely drank the Kool-Aid and I was, doing that too. But now that I'm an adult, I'm like, I was just suppressing everything that I was feeling. That's so unhealthy. So I think that there could also be like a stigma against, a woman. I'm speaking from a woman's perspective because I am a woman, but, like a woman being angry or a woman being sad, a woman being dramatic, So I think it really is such an individualized experience.
This ties into my next question so perfectly. There's a lot of pressure for women to conform to societal norms and expectations that limit their self-expression, autonomy, or advocating for themselves to assert their needs and desires. Why do you think that is, and how do you feel about that?
Why that is, I wish I knew, but I do agree that there is just a societal expectation. I could go off on a tangent about the patriarchy and all that stuff, but I do think that we are living in a time that, I'm proud to be living in despite all the horrors, but um, you know, women are speaking up and women are advocating for themselves and demanding equality. And I think that that is so brave and so awesome. So I'm proud of women everywhere who are, fighting back.
So for, let's say, women, for instance, because we're on this subject, and if you wanted to go off on a patriarchy tangent, you're more than welcome.
Never end. It would never end.
um, what does it mean to find your voice and use it?
Hmm. I think for me, finding my voice really meant that I was comfortable with who I was. I think for a long time, I've always been a people person. I've always been loud, talkative, communicative, but I think the way I define finding my own voice would be when I finally got comfortable with my own baggage and the stuff that I had been through and I accepted it for me. I then felt more powerful in using my voice because I wasn't ashamed of it. So I guess that would be my definition of it. What's yours?
Um, I think being comfortable in your skin, learning how to step into your power, um, without really worrying about how it affects anyone else. And not that you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be concerned with other people's feelings, but I think being more concerned with other people's thoughts, feelings, and actions to the point to where it makes you cower can be detrimental and doesn't really allow you to have self-expression. So for me, learning that I'm okay just as I am allowed me to find my voice. And finding it and using it, I feel like, are two different things, because once you find it, you start to get comfortable with it, but it does take time for you to get comfortable speaking up and advocating for yourself if you've been used to, people pleasing or staying quiet.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I love that.
Thank you. Okay, so I got a three-part question for you. Um, what is validation? How can someone become a slave to validation? And are there healthy forms of validation? So we'll start with what is validation?
Yes. So validation, in my own definition, would be acknowledging another person's emotions, thoughts, experience, values, belief systems. So really just an acknowledgement of that would be my definition of validation.
Okay. How can someone become a slave to validation?
So there's two different kinds of validation, external versus internal. So internal validation is like what I'm going to give myself. Like if I go for a walk on a day that, my body doesn't really feel good, I'm pretty tired, but I know a walk is going to make me feel better, or I make a smoothie, to fuel my body with nutrients, even though I'm like really tired. I'm going to give myself that validation. I'm going to say, like, good job. Like, I'm proud of myself for doing that, kind of pat myself on the back. External validation would be you telling me, good job. Wow, I'm so proud of you, Brenna. You did great. And I think that external validation is something that people can almost become addicted to or like really crave because it feels so good. We feel so seen when other people acknowledge the good things that we're doing. I definitely am guilty of that. I will oftentimes like do things around my home. And then when my husband comes home, I'm just like patiently waiting for him to be like, wow, thanks for doing X, Y, and Z. It just feels so good when other people notice what you've done. Um, so I think it's that external validation that other people can really get caught up on.
What's your view of social media and external validation?
Mm, that can become so unhealthy, especially the numbers game of people needing a certain amount of likes or a certain amount of comments, or, you know, yeah, that's dangerous, because that it can actually become an addiction, and I think a lot of times people can get caught up in basing their self-worth in the numbers of how many people saw their post or how many people liked their post. I've heard of people deleting posts if it didn't get X number of likes. So I definitely think it's really toxic, but also dangerous.
Where do you think that strong need or desire to have external validation can stem from?
I think that it's more so like a brain thing. Like, I think the neurons in our brain connect and light up when we get likes, when it really is like a brain health issue. So I think that it comes from that. Like, it feels really good when other people like our stuff. It feels really good to open up Instagram or TikTok and see you have hundreds of likes and comments and follows and whatever it is. It, gives us endorphins, it gives us serotonin, it gives us dopamine. So it's those chemicals that get released in our brain that really reinforce the pattern of like, oh, I got to keep posting, and next time I want to get more than this and I'll feel so much better.
Do you think also that maybe individuals who weren't seen and heard as a child or in a relationship can use external validation to kind of soothe those wounds?
I think they can use external validation to make them feel better momentarily. Again, using that phrase like Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Like, if you are lacking chemistry or connection in your romantic relationship and you get it in the form of like TikTok likes or Instagram likes, it's not going to make up for the fact that your romantic relationship is missing that connection and that communication and that chemistry. So I think it makes us feel good in the moment, but at the end of the day, we still don't have what we really want.
Okay, so what would be like some healthy ways to get external validation if we kind of catch ourselves in the pattern of using social media or other avenues as a way of getting that validation?
So I think again, it's like all about the awareness that you have of it. I think the first step of anything is like acknowledging, like, I find that I'm, posting with the intention or with the desire to get likes, rather than like, oh, I really love this quote and this really resonates with me today, I'm going to post this for me. So I think the first step would be really checking in with yourself and asking, why am I posting this? What is the intention here? And if you find yourself getting roped into that and you find that you're posting for likes or for comments or for follows or to grow, your social media following, maybe taking a step back and journaling about it, self-reflecting, talking to trusted friends and family members about what you're going through, because there might be something deeper there.
That's great. Thank you for that. All right, I want to ask a question about feelings. Is it possible to confuse feelings with facts?
Yes, because although our feelings aren't facts and they never will be facts, they are real to us and they feel so real. So like, for example, when someone is having anxiety about making a phone call, like nothing dangerous is going to happen on the phone, but our body really does feel like it's in danger. So it's absolutely so easy to confuse how we feel with like factual information.
I was told never argue feelings, only argue facts. And I remember I had to sit with that for a while, because most arguments happen because of an emotion. You may be angry or you may be hurt or what have you. So if you can step back in the moment and say, okay, is what I'm feeling based on something true or just how I perceive something, that could give you an opportunity to now, maybe not have such an emotional outburst or to feel a certain way about something that maybe wasn't just true, but it was just how, you perceived it and how your nervous system responded to it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Love that.
Another question. Can you control what people think of you?
No. One of my favorite quotes is other people's opinion of me is none of my business. Everyone is entitled to think what they think about you, but that doesn't have to translate into us having strong emotions about it. We can't control how people perceive us or how people think of us, but we can control how much attention we give it and how worried we are about it. I think the best way to phrase it is like, stay in your own lane. Like, worry about what you think about you. Don't worry about what other people are thinking about you.
That can be hard to do sometimes, though, especially if we haven't done a lot of emotional work to really, gain control of, how we feel in situations, or if we get activated by a certain person or a certain thing, that can be difficult to do.
Totally. And I think a lot of the times we want that external validation from other people saying like, oh my God, you're so great, or wow, you're amazing. When we don't feel that about ourselves, it's easier to get it from someone else than to really believe that stuff about us. But that's why going to therapy and doing that inner work is so important, because it will never feel as good coming from someone else as it does when you genuinely believe it about yourself.
Mm. What does it mean to meet people where they are?
For me, meeting someone where they're at is just me having an awareness of, kind of what I said earlier about familial relationships. If someone is acting irrationally or if someone is clearly acting out of hurt, meeting them where they're at is not really trying to change them or fix them or work on the situation, simply just accepting like, okay, they're not ready to do that, and that's okay. Meeting people where they're at is especially important in my work with clients, but in every clinician's work with clients. I think every clinician on the planet has experienced like, wanting to do more work with a client or seeing, an area that we can improve or work on, but the client's not ready to do that. So, meeting a client where they're at is simply saying like, okay, like, it's not my job to dictate when, where, and how they work on improving the situation. And they kind of drive their own bus. So,
That made me think of an example that my therapist gave me. She said, wanting more for someone than they want for themselves is a prime example of not meeting someone where they are. And it could be likened to expecting someone who's handicapped to stand up out of their wheelchair because you want them to when they don't have the ability to do it.
mm-hmm. Yeah. And not even, the ability. Some people just don't want to. Some people have the ability and they just don't want to. And that's okay. How someone else lives their life has nothing to do with me.
Right. I think that if we can really wrap our minds around that, we can stop trying to push people to do things that we want, or to help people do things, or act in a certain way that we feel they should. Because by doing that, you're really kind of setting yourself up for failure, because you can't expect someone to do something that you would do or the way you would do it if they don't want to.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
There's an old saying, hurting people hurt people. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah. So that saying, I think, is so simple, but so complex at the same time. So essentially, my interpretation of it is that hurt people are going to hurt people. Like, someone who is hurt is going to act out of that anger, frustration, fear, sadness that they have. So, when we're angry or sad, we're often not the nicest to people around us. We it can be far too easy to take out how we feel on someone else. So I think that saying is all about the general awareness of like someone who is really going through something, someone who is really hurt might be more likely to hurt you, and maybe not with any ill intention. Maybe they have no awareness of it, but they're so hurt that their words, actions, behaviors, and just overall vibe are going to maybe hurt someone else.
Thanks for explaining that. I think that if parents had a rough experience as a child, or they were hurt a lot, or they didn't have the ability to express themselves, a lot of times when they have children, their parenting style can show their life experience. So I wanted to ask, what is the difference between respect and obedience, and how some do parenting styles?
So respect is, I guess a little bit similar to validation. I think the way I would define respect is like showing just like regard and acknowledgement for someone else's feelings or wishes, thoughts, beliefs, even if you disagree with it. I think that's something that's missing from a lot of people, that awareness that I can still be respectful, even if I disagree with how you think or what you're saying, I can still treat you with respect. And I think obedience would be kind of like blindly listening to someone, blindly following instructions, even if you disagree with it on a moral level. Being obedient would be like, this goes against everything I believe in, but I'm still going to do it. Where I think respect would be having a conversation of like, hey, you can do that thing. I'm not going to do it for me, but no hate towards you for doing that.
Have you seen instances where parents may confuse the two and ask for obedience where it should be maybe respect? Because I know growing up, like a lot of times I would see adults demand obedience, and it may not have been something to where obedience was necessary more so than respect, and it would get confused a lot of times.
Totally. Yes. And I think that with certain cultures that is more prevalent than others. And I think that it's important for all therapists to have cultural competency of just, kind of meeting the client where they're at. Like not every client grew up the way I grew up, and every client has their own worldview and outlook. So I think that that's important as well, that a client might think that being obedient is being respectful. So then it's doing that work to decipher the difference and then kind of do the backtrack work. But yes, absolutely. I have seen parents, grandparents demand, obedience, and more so of that be seen, not heard mentality. Just not healthy.
I think a good thing to do if you find yourself in a situation where someone is saying, you're not being respectful, you could probably ask, okay, well, what does respect look like to you? And if their answer shows that they want you to be obedient instead of respectful, because respect can be a choice. You can choose to respect someone or a situation. But if someone is demanding that you do something, then that shows the difference between respect and obedience. And a lot of times I feel like we were subject to obedience without a choice, and not given the opportunity to willfully show respect.
Yeah, that's a great way to handle that.
Okay, so I wanted to ask a question that may seem simple, but I know for me, I didn't know what it was until I actually was able to feel it and understand. So I wanted to ask, what is anxiety, and how can childhood experiences cause adult anxiety?
Yeah. So, like, the general definition of anxiety would be intense, persistent, or excessive worry or fear about either everyday situations or specific situations. So childhood experiences can absolutely cause adult anxiety. And there's so many ways that this can show up, and it's very individualized. But for an example, like if you often got yelled at as a child, or you lived in a home where yelling was the primary form of communication between your parents or you and your siblings, you might internalize like that to be unhealthy or unsafe. And then if you are an adult and you are around other people screaming, or someone screams at you, you might really kind of go back to that place where you were as a child and act and feel as if you did back in that situation. So yes, absolutely, things you experience as a child and in childhood can manifest as anxiety in the future.
Hmm. I think that for me, when I had my first panic attack, I was like, what is this? And then as I started to feel little micro doses of that feeling, I go, oh, this is anxiety. And this has been anxiety for as long as I can remember. Right. And I think that it just kept building and kept building and kept building until my bucket was full. And then from there, it was, my shoelace wasn't tied, and I had a panic attack because I had been experiencing anxiety for so long that it didn't take much now for me, my nervous system to, have a huge reaction to something that was small.
Hmm. Yeah.
What I want to ask now is for people who have been suffering with anxiety or different symptoms, they begin their healing journey and they start to practice self love. And for people who may not be on the same journey, self love may seem like something that is selfish. So I wanted to ask, why is self love sometimes seen as selfish?
I think self love is often confused for selfishness a lot because, again, focusing more on women, I think women grow up with this inherent belief that, like, we are on this earth to serve other people and to do things for other people. So I think that it can be especially hard for women to take time for themselves or to feel like they deserve it. For me, self love is so important because I am the best version of me when I pour into me first. I am a better wife when I have taken time to care for myself. I'm a better therapist when I've taken time to care for myself. I'm a better friend, family member, coworker, you name it. I'm better when my cup is full. Um, so, I think though that with that, oftentimes I need to set boundaries or to miss out on things with other people because I need to fill my cup. Sometimes if I have had a crazy busy week with clients and social plans on Friday or Saturday, I'm not going to be able to go to that dinner because I need a night in. I need a night to rest and recharge and to go to bed really early. So I think that actions like that can be viewed as selfish from other people, when in reality, it's not selfish at all to say, hey, my social battery has run out. I need to sit this one out, but I'll definitely be there, next week or the next time.
Mm, that was a great explanation. Social battery, I think, is something that we can all have a mental picture of, because there are times when we just don't want to do something, or we get that invite, or whatever it is, and we're just like, oh, I don't have enough juice for this. So I think
Hmm.
you using that analogy was perfect.
Yes. And as a therapist, so much, all of my job is, talking to people, connecting to people, being really present. So I often find that, especially at the end of a busy day, Tuesdays are really client heavy for me. Um, and even in my home with my husband at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to talk at all. I love you and I will ask you about your day for 5 minutes. But after that, I want to sit in silence in our bedroom. You stay out here in the living room. Like I just need to be alone. Um, and that's super important for me. I'm someone that for every couple hours that I'm with other people, I need at least 1 hour to myself to just kind of rest, recharge, close my eyes for a second, and then I'm good. But I definitely need that recharge time.
Mm. As a therapist, what would you say your goals are for your clients? And if someone wanted to work with you, what would you say your specialty is?
Yeah. So my goals for my clients are whatever my clients' goals are. Again, really meeting them where they're at. I have no goals for them. I believe in a really collaborative approach. I don't want any of my clients, current or future, to think that they are coming to me and I'm going to set the rules and how this goes. I really want it to be a teamwork approach. So during the intake session, I often ask my clients, what are your goals for here? What do you want to accomplish here? So those are my goals for them, but they set those. And as a therapist, I specialize in anxiety, life transitions, trauma, and traumatic brain injury. I'm really big into brain health. So I bring that in with my clients a lot.
Okay. Okay, so last question. And this is a big one. If you could use your platform to encourage anyone who may be struggling with their big feelings or emotions, and they may be scared to talk to somebody, whether it's a therapist as a coach or a coach, what would you say?
Like if I could talk to that person?
Right.
Um, I'm a big believer in planting seeds. So I think that I would gently just say, like, hey, I'm here. If you ever need anything, reach out if and when you're ready. But then I'd kind of leave it. I don't love people that, and this is therapists, but just people in general that are, kind of jumping down your throat or trying to make you be ready when you're not ready to do something or talk about something. I think that planting seeds is a really good way to do that, of just saying, like, hey, whenever you're ready to talk about that thing, I'm here, and just kind of leaving it. I don't think anyone likes to feel like attacked or like someone is prying for information. So I guess I'd use my platform, or just, yeah, my space on the internet, to just be like, I'm here when you're ready.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for this. I really appreciate your time and for you being willing to do this with me. Um, if someone
Yes.
wanted to find you, if someone wanted to find you online or on social media to follow you, in your content, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram and TikTok. I'm not like a big TikToker, but they are both at Therapy with Bren, Bren. And then my email, you can just email me. It's my first and last name, Brenna Tighe at gmail.com.
Perfect. All right, Brenna. Well, thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful. So, quick question: your podcast. Are you still podcasting, or are you taking a break?
So yeah, I've been calling it a break for like 2 years now. I think it's done. I'm never going to say never, but for now, I am not doing it. It was really, really fun at the time and something I really enjoyed doing, but life has picked up, and, my work has picked up now. So I really am more focused on like my clients and stuff like that. But who knows? Maybe in the future, I'll pick it back up.
I gotcha. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed this. I love what you do. I love your personality, the way you do things. So thank you
Thank
for your
you so much.
time, for who you are, for what you do, and for how you do it.
Yes, thank you. This is great.